Welcome to the Peggy Smedley Show, the podcasting voice of IoT and digital transformation, with your host, Peggy Smedley.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Day 3 of CES 2020. I'm Peggy Smedley, your host of the Peggy Smedley Show, and I'm telling you, it's going to be loud today. I already can hear them behind us. I want to welcome my guests today. First, I have David Harold, who's the CMO of Imagination Technologies.
Hello.
David, welcome.
Thank you.
And next to him is Graham Deacon, who's the Vice President of Power VR Business of Operations of Imagination Technologies. Welcome.
Thank you for having us along. Welcome.
All right, so we've got a lot to talk about, and I know you guys have exciting news here, and I know that you guys have not had a chance to really walk around the show as we were sitting here talking about, but that's okay because I think we've got enough to talk about, not so much to say, but there's a lot of noise behind us, but we're going to get talking about. I think before we get going and talking about all of your technology, I'd love for you to give our viewers an update on Imagination Technologies. For those folks who might not know who you guys are and what you've been up to as of late, I would love for you to kind of give an update on what you guys do, who you are, and maybe some of the latest things that have evolved over the past few years since we've probably done an interview with you folks.
Sure. It's a funny one because actually a lot of people don't know who Imagination Technologies are.
We do.
But there are more products in the world with our technology in than there are people. So, just Power VR, which is the area that Graham is responsible for, is approaching 7 billion units shipped. So even just that area of our business has more things out there than people to use them. I'm not quite sure how that works, except that we're in lots of different things that people have. So we're in their mobile phones, or their TVs, or their cars, or their radios. Just all sorts of different bits and pieces. But, we don't make those products. We don't even make the chip that goes into those products. So we're what's called an intellectual property business, which is kind of a fancy way of saying that actually our product is not a physical thing. Our product is a design for technology. And we license that to mostly big chip makers, but also some of the bigger device manufacturers, the OEMs, who have got big enough to start making their own chips. And we license different kinds of technology to them. Now, we started off doing PC add-in cards for 3D gaming, so we were one of the first companies that did 3D graphics for computers, and then we started doing games consoles, working with Sega, and arcade systems, so with people like Sega and Namco, and that really was the start of the business. And then around about the turn of the millennium, we spotted that mobile phones were coming through and they had games on them. And you looked at those games and it's a green snake, and try to keep going without it hitting itself. And the graphics were like super basic. So this is my all-time personal favorite anecdote. I'm sorry, but I would squeeze it in. When we were doing PC cards, actually initially we looked at our sales and thought these aren't as high as they should be. And we went out and we talked to consumers and they said, oh, well, I didn't buy your graphics card because it didn't have a big fan on it to cool down your super powerful GPU. And we said, well, did you look at the benchmarks? Our performance is just as good as those cards that have the giant fans on them. They're like, oh, no, you can't be as good because you don't need the giant fan. So we went out and we bought the cheapest fan you could possibly buy and put it on the card, and it was largely cosmetic, and our sales went right up. But what we found through that was, hang on, we're actually much lower power than everyone else doing 3D graphics. And if we're lower power, maybe that means we can do some things that they can't do. And mobile phones, or mobile in general, was one of those markets. So the very first products we did were a now dead category we call PDAs, sort of like a tablet but the size of a phone kind of a thing. And then the first phones started coming through, and pretty much people looked at those phones and they said, well, it's got a lot of buttons and I don't know how I'm going to get my game on it over 2G, and is this really going to happen? And then 2007, Apple brought in the iPhone and Samsung brought in the Galaxy, and suddenly everyone went, oh, now it's just one big screen. That's great for games. That's really good. And our business has kind of rocketed since then, and we got into lots of other areas, so cars and TVs and all those other things.
Who would have thought Apple would have brought something like this that would have changed our world, right?
I mean, changed our world in so many ways that I don't think people would have predicted, right? So when we started off, our vision was almost totally about gaming. You know, let's be honest, it was about gaming and it was about the operating system. But then the number of ways in which people use graphics, so some of the navigation apps, visualization apps, I look at a thing now, my daughter's just got to the age where she can start to use those apps which put, cat ears on you and all of that kind of thing. And I'm like, baby, that's our technology, that's what we do. Oh, right. And I would never have thought that's the sorts of applications that people would develop.
So let's be honest about this. When you have this conversation, your daughter's just understanding, and you say, what does daddy do? She looks at you and like, I don't know, but the moment you said it's gaming, she gets excited. Admit it.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. So gaming is a thing that really drives people's perceptions, and it's one of those odd things because it's a little bit cyclic. Right now, gaming on mobile is very hot, partly because people are familiar with the idea of sort of portability with things like Nintendo Switch, but also because there are certain games now, things like Fortnite, which really have very intense graphical requirements. What a Fortnite player wants is to know that they're going to get a consistent experience. It's going to be 30 frames per second all the time, no dropouts. They're not going to suddenly find themselves beaten because of something that happened in the hardware. So really you have to deliver a very consistent graphical experience for a long period of time, and that's where that whole thing about low power comes back into play, because actually a lot of phones using other graphics technologies which we did not create after a period of time they get very hot and they start to ramp down their performance in order to keep going. And that is absolutely infuriating for gamers. They just want it to stay. They don't mind if suddenly it goes, I'm out of battery, I'm going to switch off. That they can live with. But this gradual degradation is just beyond the pale.
Now, we talked about gaming as being one, but as you mentioned at the onset of this conversation, automotive, 45% in those heads up, and it's not really that, but we were talking before we went on air is about what kind of technology. It's not so much, it's kind of behind the scenes, kind of like that. Talk a little bit, Graham, about that. It's the real technology that makes a lot of this happen that I think is really intriguing for people to understand. I don't want to say it's the brains, but it's a lot of the power that makes this stuff, as you're describing, that I think is really interesting. And I think when we go on, and you guys have now Power VR and all this other things, but I think it's beyond that. But I think it's what makes this stuff happen in automotive and other industries, I should say, that's really important.
Yeah, so the graphics technology that we do, especially in automotive, it is creating the brand for the car. So the first perception that a driver gets is either it's the mechanics of the car and how well it goes, or it's how it looks. So they want to be entertained. They want to have a good visual quality of the dashboard. And if you look around the show here, you're seeing that every vehicle is going to be multiple screens. They're starting to bring in driver support technologies that are about mirrors and surround view and AI technologies, and we have all of the parts that bring that together. The displays now are going right across the car. There's 4 or 5 of them, and the expectation is that looks better than the original hardware version of it, the mechanical version of it. So what we're seeing is the cost of mechanical implementations is going up, and it's actually cheaper to put a display in there. Yeah. So, and the quality of the pixels behind that have to be very good. There have to be more of them, so the performance requirement is going up. And strangely, you wouldn't expect that power is an issue in a car. It's got a massive generator there. But these technologies got to work when the car's at 50 degrees in the sun, and so low power is actually important. You can't have a fan on the engineering element in there. You can't have a fan on the chip. It's got to be low power. So our technologies directly drive into that concept as well.
very critical. Absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, what's the similarity between a phone and a car? Heat. You can't have a hot phone sitting in your pocket. You can't have a car where you might get thermal hotspots that cause a fire. The same technology, very different looking products, but we're chosen to be used in those products for similar reasons.
And that's what's made it interesting about how you're now seeing screens on a lot of things, right? In that very thing we've talked about, now it's on everything, right? I mean, I'm probably exaggerating, but as people want to see things and visualize things, because we're seeing the advancement of 5G and that movement, the way that vertical markets are changing, is that changing your business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what are we not in? We've got customers who are doing displays on fridges. We've got customers who are doing wearables, so watches. We've got customers who are doing personal assistants. Customers that then, moving into smartphones. Smartphones are getting bigger screens with the foldable screens. Then up to computing, so pro tablets and Chromebooks, TVs, 4K, 8K. It's everything now has a screen on it, pretty much. And those screens are getting more demanding. They're running more demanding applications, and they're getting bigger all the time, and that requires more graphics performance. But you need to deliver more graphics performance without delivering a lot more power usage and cost and all of those metrics, which is why we had to bring in this A-series GPU, which we launched a few weeks ago, in order to sort of hit that higher performance area without actually incurring silicon and power costs.
And how is that? What's the feedback then?
So, we're getting a very, very good positive response on this technology. So what we did about a year ago, we made a decision to say that we're not going to compete with the other IP suppliers in the market, because that's not what really our business is about. Our business is about enabling our customers, the semiconductor companies and the OEMs, to beat their competitors, and every year they need differentiation. So what we've done with our A-series is make a very significant step up in performance. Now that's performance. I mean, we have a very scalable architecture. We can generate very, very small cores for smaller IoT displays, and we can generate graphics technology that will go into the data center and be very, very high performance. But at each level of that, it's got to be as efficient as it can be, and for that performance point. What we've done is taken a very significant step up in performance density, whether that's per performance per watt or whether it's performance per silicon area. And we've done that so that we can enable our customers to get into the market with a product that competes with the best thing out there today, or in a year's time when they get there. We've got to be working a year ahead.
Just to give an example of how that is, compared to the previous generation, we're 2.5 times more performance. Whereas, previously from generation to generation, you might expect 20, 30%. Suddenly you've got 250%.
So the industry itself, when you look at the semiconductor industry, is experiencing a lot of growth. Are you expecting it between this year and subsequently, in future years? Is that what you're really seeing right now? When we talk about these industries that are seeing it that we just described, because everybody wants a screen on something, right?
Yeah. So if you look at the car industry today, the number of cars being built, that's fairly flat. But what we're seeing is a massive growth in the number of semiconductors in the car. Now, the OEMs are trying to reduce that by condensing multiple systems into one in some cases, but we're expecting over the next 5 years somewhere around a 400% increase in the number of semiconductors that have our technology or need our technology in them. So there's a huge growth market straight off.
I know we just have about a minute left to go, and I know we don't have more to talk, but I am kind of curious about what's going on with what's happening with China and the U.S. From a political standpoint, do you see that impacting anything that's going on?
I mean, it's something that we have to think about. We do most of our business still in the U.S. We're a UK company. We have no customers in the UK. All our business is US and Asia, tiny bit in Europe. So, we look at the situation closely. One of the things we have found is that actually the business in China is getting much better because we're based in the UK. We do development in the UK, in Australia, in Europe. We don't actually create any technology in the USA, and so the various restrictions about technology exports that have hit some of the other IP companies haven't hit us, and I guess that makes us a safe pair of hands for companies who either are in China or who really want to sell to China and work a lot with China are quite keen on working with us at the minute.
At the moment. All right, well, David Harold, CMO of Imagination Technologies.
Thank you, Peggy.
And I want to say, Graham, thank you so much. Graham Deacon. What's your URL so our listeners and viewers can find more about what you guys are doing?
It's imgtec.com or imaginationtech.com.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for spending time with us. All right, that's all the time we have for this segment. Stick around. We've got a whole lot more coming to you right here from CES 2020. So if you've got lots to do today, you're missing out. If you've got time to stick around, stay with us. All right, this is the Peggy Smedley Show, the podcasting voice of IoT and digital transformation. And remember, with great technology comes great responsibility. We'll be right back after this short break.